Now I know what you're asking yourself, have I managed to stick to my guns again for yet another month, only buy games that I really want into the collection, or have I just rushed out there and bought a shed load of PS2 shovelware? Well, if you want to find out, you're just going to have to wait until after these. Now, as with all the pickup videos that I've put out over the last, 2.5 years since I started properly collecting again, I'm going to start with the newer stuff first and work my way back to that juicy retro at the end. And we all know you love the juicy retro at the end. But before we get there, we need to look at some of the newer PCs that I've brought into the collection and also some of the hardware. And to start it off, well, it's going to be this here. Now, a lot of you out there might be scratching your heads wondering what it is I'm actually showing you. Well, this is an M.2 drive that is compatible with a PlayStation 5. Probably one of the most consumer friendly things that Sony did at the time while developing the PlayStation 5 was to include an M.2 drive slot so we could upgrade the storage in a PlayStation 5 without having to resort to that horrible proprietary system that the Xbox Series got. Now, I have been holding off buying an M.2 drive for my PlayStation 5 because, quite frankly, the slightly over 600GB that comes as standard with the PlayStation 5 has been enough to cater for my needs. However, as you can see from this one, it's not just a simple M.2 drive, it's a Star Wars Mandalorian Beskar ingot. And when I saw this, there was absolutely no hesitation whatsoever to pick it up and get it slotted into my PlayStation 5. And although I didn't believe I truly needed one, and I probably still don't believe I need one, after having this 1TB drive installed into the PlayStation 5, it will take away the headache of, do I need to uninstall a game before I put a new one in? So that's the Star Wars Mandalorian M.2 drive, 1TB of storage, safely into the collection. Well, it's safely into my PlayStation 5, which is definitely in the collection. Next up, and still with the PlayStation 5, but moving on to software, the part that most of you are all interested in, I did pick up this game here, Martha is Dead. Now, I can't talk too much about Martha is Dead because I haven't had a chance to play it yet, and I haven't really watched too much about it either. What I do know, however, it is a slightly disturbing game, and with spooky month of October coming up, it's always good to bolster your horror collection, so you've got plenty of games that you can play during that particular month. And I suppose another reason to pick it up is that if I don't buy a horror game every now and again, Jen over at Retro Rivals and Mark at Geordie Slasher Gamer, well, they get a bit upset that I don't have enough horror in my life. But that is Martha is Dead coming into the collection. I'll play it soon and hopefully it's as gruesome as they all say. Next up for the PlayStation 5 is a game that I've absolutely been chomping at the bit to get my hands on, and that is Like a Dragon Ishin. Now, anyone who knows me and has been following the channel for say the last 9 months will realise that yes, I did discover the Yakuza games quite late. My particular gateway into the Yakuza games was Like a Dragon, a fantastic JRPG with traditional turn-based combat that I fell in love with the second that I booted it up. From that very positive experience with Like a Dragon, I did delve back into the back catalogue of the Yakuza games and thoroughly enjoyed every one that I've played so far. The only one in the mainline games I've still to play is 6, so with the release of Ishin this year I had to pick it up, and I've already started playing this one, you'll be glad to hear. And as much as it still holds a lot of its PlayStation 3 DNA for what is touted to be a remake, this one so far has definitely been quite a surprise. The game itself is set in the mid 1800s, long before the Yakuza were even a thing, so in this game, rather than being part of the Yakuza, you're part of one of the many samurai factions that dominated the Japanese landscape of the time. Now, any fans of the Yakuza series will recognise many of the characters in this particular game because all the character models are from the Yakuza games. So you have Kiryu and Majima and the whole host of Yakuza characters running about in mid 1800s Japan with katanas and taking on other samurai. So Like a Dragon Ishin, I'm absolutely loving this at the moment, and it's definitely going to stay in the collection. Well, it wasn't going to not anyway. It's one of the Yakuza games. That was the last of the PlayStation 5 games, and moving on to another console, and that console being the Switch. And I say this month after month, the Switch really is pulling me in with the quality of games that's been released for it. And I don't mean new games, I mean remakes and remasters. And I did pick up this here, Legend of K Anniversary Edition. Now I already have The Legend of K on the PlayStation 2 and I can play it digitally on the PlayStation 4, but the beauty of the Switch, you can take the game on the go. It wouldn't be quite as easy to take out your PlayStation 2 and a CRT to play some Legend of K out in the wild, but the Switch really is doing justice to the market where people want these classic games that they can take out on the go with them, whether they're on long commutes or just staying away from home for a bit. So that's The Legend of K on the Switch, the Anniversary Edition, into the collection, and it will sit beside The Legend of K on the PlayStation 2. Next up, and still for the PlayStation 4, is a game that I didn't think I would get my hands on physically, and that is Spiritfarer. Now, Spiritfarer was a game that I played digitally only last year and absolutely loved it. It is of course very much an indie title, and when it comes to indie games moving on to physical releases, they're either quite limited in their numbers and difficult to get their hands on, or become extremely expensive. So when I saw a copy of Spiritfarer sitting in my local game store shelf for a very reasonable price, I had no option but to pick it up. It is a game that I'll go back to and play again because I thoroughly enjoyed it and it's my style of game. There's a little bit more strategy to it than just all-out arcade action, and the story itself is absolutely delightful. It follows the journey of a young girl who becomes the ferryman of death and has to help other spirits cross over by resolving whatever they didn't resolve in their life. So that's Spiritfarer for the PlayStation 4, coming into the collection where it will happily sit there for life. Now, next up and last up for the PlayStation 4 is a game that's coming into the collection that I've already shown. Well, it's a collector's edition that I've already shown because it was a gift from the wonderful Fresh and Mary over at A Co-op of Nerds, and I'll put a link into the description just so you can watch that video if you want yourself, because I'm not going to spend too much on showing this off again, but it is a wonderful piece. It's Persona 5 and it's a Take Your Heart Premium Edition. I absolutely love it. The stuff inside it's fabulous, but as I said, there's a video out there for you to watch if you want to see what's inside this box and what the wonderful Fresh and Mary sent over here from Indianapolis, nearly 4,000 miles. So Persona 5 Take Your Heart Premium Edition into the collection, where I'm trying desperately to make some room that I can display it. Now we're moving away from the PlayStation 4 and down a generation, or down a generation and a half. You'll see what I mean in a minute, because I didn't pick up any PlayStation 3 games this month. Now I know Josh over at Drinking Games with Josh will be most disappointed that I didn't pick up any of these PlayStation 3 games that he adores, but that just happens from time to time. Anyway, back onto what I did pick up, and for the DS, the first one is Myst. Now, anyone who's been watching some of my recent videos, I have recently discovered there was a lot of PC ports to the DS, and as soon as I found out that, well, PC gaming, especially back in the early to mid 90s, was where I made my home when it came to gaming. So seeing all these games that I played on a PC back in the 90s coming onto a handheld, the DS of all handhelds, I just have to grab up every one that I come across. So Myst for the DS, I've still to play it, and I will be playing it soon because I'm curious to see how this translates onto the DS, is into the collection, where it will remain with a whole host of other PC ports for the DS in the collection. Next up, we're staying with the DS. It's not going to be a PC port this time, but this is going to be a sort of link back to my old days of playing in the arcades, because one of my favourite games back in the 80s was Track and Field, and I saw this new Track and Field for the DS. Again, I've got to throw my hands up. The DS is a system that I've never really collected for in the past. It's a system that I haven't really used that much. Now that I do have the console in my life, and every now and again I do see a game that piques my interest, I will pick it up and give it a play. And games that are going to pique my interest other than PC ports are arcade ports, or sort of reimaginings of arcade ports to the DS. So that's new International Track and Field for the DS coming into the collection, where it will sit with the other Track and Field games that I have in the collection. So we're moving away from the DS but staying with the handhelds and moving over to Sony handhelds. Now I haven't picked up any Vita games, but I have picked up a PSP game. But it's a PSP game that I should really be playing on my Dreamcast, and there seems to be a lot of ports coming to the collection this month, because this one is the Power Stone collection for the PlayStation Portable. Now I do have the original disc for Power Stone and Power Stone 2, but it's a pair of games that I've never played for myself. Now that's not because I don't want to, it's just because there's so many options and you've got to make some sacrifices now and again. So when I saw this Power Stone collection for the PSP, I had to grab it because it'll give me another option to have a look at these games. And I'm quite looking forward to seeing what all the hype about Power Stone was, because it does get a lot of love out there. Now, if you have played this game, you can drop down into the comments like with any of the other games and let me know your feelings on them too. But that's the Power Stone collection for the PSP coming into the collection, where it will say forevermore. So we're moving away from the handhelds, but we're sticking with Sony and we're moving down a generation to the PlayStation 2. Yes, the home turf, the place where I tend to spend most of my money, or I have been until of late, because I'm trying not to just pick up everything I see and only important titles. And when it comes to the PlayStation 2, that's the system that I really have to rein myself in for. Now I have picked up 4 titles for the PlayStation 2, and you'll be the judge whether I've picked up shovelware that I shouldn't have picked up, or whether it's all gems and they deserve to be in the collection. And we're going to start with a game that I already have for the PlayStation 2, so we see where we're heading there. And that is Tomb Raider Anniversary, but this is the collector's edition. Now yes, as I said, I do have Tomb Raider Anniversary for not only the PlayStation 2 but also the Wii, so there was absolutely no need whatsoever for me to pick up this particular collector's edition. It is however in great condition for its age. I do have a large soft spot for Lara Croft, as many of you out there do too, and upgrading from just a simple release to the collector's edition, which was complete and very reasonably priced, I had no option but to pick this up so it can go into the collection. And I'll move on my current copy. Well, this is my current copy now. The other copy that's sitting over there with the rest of the PlayStation 2 games will find a new home, no doubt, and it won't be too hard, I would imagine. So that's Tomb Raider Anniversary Collector's Edition into the collection, and I'm so happy to have this one there too. Now next up for the PlayStation 2, it's a kinda shovelware game. It's a game that doesn't cost a great deal of money. I believe it was £1.50 that I paid for it, but I had to pick it up because it's part of a subset that I want to complete, and that's the Star Trek games on the PlayStation 2. And this one here is Star Trek Shattered Universe. Now I haven't played this yet, so I can't really talk about it. I will get round to playing it at some point because I am a bit of a trekker. And that doesn't mean I'm not into Star Wars, because obviously you know that too. I do love my classic science fiction and science fantasy, and Star Trek is one of the kings when it comes to that. As far as I'm aware, I've only got one more of the Star Trek games for the PlayStation 2 to pick up to bring into the collection, but I'm sure I'll find that at some point. But that's Star Trek Shattered Universe coming into the collection, where it will sit with the other 2 Star Trek games that are already down there waiting for it to join them. Now next up, and still for the PlayStation 2, is a game that I should have brought into the collection a long time ago. I had it back in the day but got rid of it because that's what we did back in the day. We got games, we traded them, or we gave them away. That's just how it is. This one however should have come back into the collection much more quickly than it did, because it's not an incredibly expensive JRPG, but it is a very good JRPG, and it's all thanks to Scotty over at Sega Blocks for mentioning this the other day and reminding me I still need it in the collection. And that is Dark Chronicles on the PlayStation 2. Now I'm not going to bore you about talking about Dark Chronicles on the PlayStation 2, because if you're watching this channel you probably know all about Dark Chronicles. It's a fantastic JRPG, it's the sequel to Dark Cloud, and is one of those JRPGs that anyone who's a JRPG fan should give it a go at the very least. I'm looking at you, Chicken Phillips, because I don't know if you've played this or not. You'll have to let me know in the comments. But that is Dark Chronicles coming into the collection for the PlayStation 2, where it will most definitely stay forever, amen. Now next up and last up for the PlayStation 2 is a game that I already have in the collection. I have it on a remaster, a Kiwami remaster for the PlayStation 4, because that game is Yakuza on the PlayStation 2. Now I hadn't really thought about buying all the Yakuza games, despite my absolute love for them, or the love that I've developed for them over this last year or so. But I thought to myself when I was out and about, this isn't too badly priced at the moment, and if I get this into the collection, at least I've got one of the original Yakuza games in the collection, and I don't need to worry about getting 2, 3, 4 and whatever other ones come out in the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3. As most of you already know, I already have Zero, the Kiwami remake, remakes, and of course the collection of 3, 4 and 5 on the PlayStation 4, as well as Yakuza 6 on the PlayStation 4. So I didn't really need this, but it's a nice piece. I don't know if I'll ever play Yakuza on the PlayStation 2. Maybe I should. Let me know down in the comments if I should play this, compare it to the Kiwami version. So that's Yakuza for the PlayStation 2 coming into the collection, where it will be cherished forever and ever. Now that was the last of the PlayStation 2, so we're moving down a generation, staying with Sony, so it's time for the PlayStation games. Now the first PlayStation game that I picked up this month I've already showcased on the channel. I don't know if you've had the chance to see it. It's there if you want to check it out, because it's Incredible Crisis. Now this was one of those late release PlayStation games that came out about the same time as the PlayStation 2, so there wasn't a great deal of hype for it. I'm quite sure that most people who played it back in the early 2000s played it on a demo disc, but games like that tend to have a way to burrow into the back of your head and slowly seep out, buy me, and over the course of many decades, and that's exactly the case when it comes to Incredible Crisis. I'll be frankly honest with you, I think this is the first copy of this game that I've ever seen out in the wild, and when I saw it in this condition I knew I just had to buy it and play it. And if you want to see me play it, then just drop that down into the comments. I'm more than happy to do anything that you ask, well within reason that is. So that's Incredible Crisis for the PlayStation, a very Japanese game, a very late 90s early noughties Japanese game, full of fun and weird and wacky minigames, coming into the collection where it's going to stay forevermore now. Next up, and still with the PlayStation, is a game that I had to get back into the collection, one that I loved back in the day, one that's part of a series that I want all the games in the series for. Well maybe, I'll talk about that later maybe, because I'm not sure about the handheld ones, but for all the main console ones, and the game that's coming in is Tenchu 2. Now the Tenchu games, as most of you already know, are absolutely fantastic. They're maybe not the first of the stealth games, but they were one of the series of games that totally immersed themselves in stealth. And not only that, we're looking at the birth of the Souls games as well when we're looking at Tenchu. And if memory serves me correctly, From Software did work on some of the later games in the series. But Tenchu 2 had to come into the collection so it could sit beside Tenchu up there on the PlayStation shelf, and it's going to live there forevermore and definitely get played as well, because this game is utter class. So that's the last of the PlayStation games. It's the last of the 32-bit games, because we're moving down a generation onto the 16-bit, and I'm sure you're all excited about that, because who doesn't love the 16-bit era? And the game that I've picked up for the 16-bit era this month is Aladdin on the Sega Mega Drive, or the Genesis if you're from the States. Now, believe it or not, I didn't play or own Aladdin back in the day. To be fair, I was 20 years old at the time, so the cartoon style didn't exactly draw me in. But of course, looking back as not only an adult, but an adult gamer, you absolutely must appreciate the work that went into the Disney games on the 16-bit era machines. Sure, the gameplay can be a little bit clunky at times, it can be a little bit frustrating, but it's an absolutely classic game, and it's one that anyone who's a fan of that era should have in the collection. And that is Aladdin, along with any of the other Disney games, to be frankly honest. But Aladdin's here now, it will join the other Mega Drive games up there, especially the Disney ones, and stay in the collection forevermore. Now that was the only Mega Drive game I bought, and it was also the only 16-bit game I bought. So from here on in, we're looking at 8-bit gaming, and you can't beat about 8-bit gaming because it's where a lot of us started, and a lot of us still have a lot of love for it. But I did pick up some hardware, because something that I've been meaning to get into the collection for a long time, and you've probably just heard that plastic clunk there, and that is the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, I haven't had a Nintendo Entertainment System since 1995, and that was the first and only other Nintendo Entertainment System that I ever owned. I bought that particular one at a car boot sale in Newcastle for the princely sum of £5. This one, however, cost a little bit more than that. And yes, the price of these older consoles have definitely creeped up over the years, because there's a lot of fun to be had with them. But as you can see, this one here is absolutely stunning looking. I'm over the moon to have an NES into the collection for the first time, because when I bought it before, I had it for a couple of weeks, gave it to a nephew. This one is for me to explore the NES library properly and play it, and hopefully not get too frustrated with the games. But it's NES and NES hard, but it's in the collection forever now. You can't buy a new console without buying a game for it, because what would be the point in that? So the very first NES game that I've ever bought for myself is in this here, and that's, yes, a couple of nerds dust sleeve for it, because they sent that along with that wonderful Persona 5 collector's edition gift. But the game that I bought to fill this with Double Dragon. Now, Double Dragon's an absolutely classic game. It's a game that I played in the 80s on the arcade. I have many fond memories of it, so much so that I prefer Double Dragon to Final Fight or even Streets of Rage. And no, don't spam the comments with hate, I do love Streets of Rage, I just have much more nostalgia for Double Dragon. Now, as for Double Dragon on the NES, that may be a different thing. I do have it for the Atari 2600 and that is a nightmare experience, but I'm sure on the NES Double Dragon will play just fine. Maybe not quite arcade quality, but it'll be good enough for me to get through a few levels, maybe with some help from a friend, if, well, I ever have a friend. But it's in the collection forever now. Now, staying with the 8-bit stuff, the last of the 8-bit stuff are 3 pieces here that I didn't buy for myself. I won them in a contest ran on YouTube by the wonderful ZX Tetley. Now, I do implore you, I'll put a link down in the description to go and watch that contest video, because it's one of the only places that you'll see something happen that you don't normally see happen, and that is Scotland beating England in a football match. But all joking aside, he did run this competition, I did happen to win, and I got some wonderful juicy 8-bit pieces down here for 2 systems that have been with me my almost entire gaming life. And we'll start with a Codemasters game, so there's a clue for y'all, and it's Ski Simulator from Codemasters on the ZX Spectrum. Now, I've played many of the Codemasters games over the years. I have been playing them since the 80s and I still play them today, but I do not recall ever playing Professional Ski Simulator. I don't recall it at all. I haven't sat down and played this one yet. I'm going to, just to see if I have played it back in the day, because you know what it's like. There was so many games back then that you played that you didn't really pay too much attention to, but later down the line, maybe 30, 40 years, you take a look at it again and all the old feelings come rushing back. And with Codemasters, there was a lot of them out there. They were all simulators and they were never simulators, but they were great fun to play. So once I've played this, I'll let you know whether this is a game that I played back in the day. I just can't recall it at the moment, but it's in the collection now and it will be getting played really soon. Now, next up is another ZX Spectrum game, and you might expect that coming from a contest that was run on ZX Tetley. Now, the Tetley part's all down to T, I believe, but he would have to answer that yourself, so pop along and check him out and ask him why the Tetley's there. But anyway, onto the game that came as part of this prize. Is a game for the ZX Spectrum that I did play back in the day. I have been playing it throughout the years, and it's a great fun game, a game that's loved by many people, and it's Ivan Iron Man Stewart's Super Off-Road for the ZX Spectrum. Now, there were many of these top-down, almost isometric racing games on the 8-bit consoles and computers, but only a few of them had the quality to stand out, and that's because there was just so many of them. But Super Off-Road in the ZX Spectrum and the other systems that it was ported to is one of the class versions of this game, so if you want to take a stroll down nostalgia lane and play a top-down racer for the first time in a long time, or you've never played one before and you want to try it for yourself because these were before your time, then I can heartily recommend Ivan Iron Man Stewart's Super Off-Road is a game that you should play, and it's in my collection forever. Amen. Now we're moving away from the ZX Spectrum onto another system, another 8-bit system, a system that I lusted after as a child back in the late 70s, early 80s, one that I didn't get for myself until much later, because I went down the route, or at least my parents went down the route of the ZX Spectrum, which was a wise choice. But the game that came as part of this prize is definitely one that I'm looking forward to playing because I've never played it, and it's Championship Soccer for the Atari 2600. And not only that, it came boxed, complete with its manual, and yes, it's an Atari 2600 game. And yes, there's a lot of hype at the moment about the Atari 2600 because of the Plus it's just about to be released. And let me tell you, I am absolutely dying to get my hands on that particular new model of Atari 2600. And as luck would have it, I might even be able to play this cart on a brand new console in that case. I do have an Atari 2600 Junior that I will be playing on it initially, but I'm looking forward to seeing if the new console can handle this old cartridge. And as much as I'm not into sports games much anymore these days, when you're playing 8-bit soccer games or football games, then this is just fun. It's fun, and it's in the collection forever. Amen. So there you go, my friends, that was all the pickups I made over the last 4 or so weeks. And what did you think? Any of those games in there, games that you love, games that you have in your collection already, games that you want into your collection, or games that you would love just to fire into space, shoot into the sun and never see again, because that's the thing about video games, it's all opinions. Everybody's got one and they can all be different. Thank you very much for watching as always, and until next time, cheerio.